So towards the end of my year of reading, there was an article about my project in the New York Times, which brought some interest from some publishers. But at first, I really didn't see what a book could be, since I had my whole year on my website. Every single day is still on the website.
You thought that was it written?
Yeah. And then I realized that the book could be a tribute to my sister, and it could also be a really recounting of all the different lessons I learned. Because some of those lessons, I didn't even realize I'd learned them till further on into the year. And when I looked back at my year, I realized that I really had progressed. That first, I had made the huge important step of incorporating memories, her memories and our memories together back into my life and not pushing them away.
And did you include those in the reviews on your website?
A little bit, but what I more talked about in the website were, this book, like The Elegance of the Hedgehog, the very first book that I read, talks about how important it is to hold on to moments of joy for in your life in the future. When you're in despair, you can look back on those moments and feel good again. Yeah. And it was only later, after I read The Emigrants by W.J. Sebald, that I realized those moments of joy could include the moments I'd had with my sister.
Right.
And then I realized I wanted to go even further back and find out what had brought my parents to the United States in the first place. And the day that my sister died, my father broke down. You know, it's one of the very few times I've seen him really crying in my whole life. And he just kept repeating 3 in 1 night, 3 in 1 night. And I had no idea what he was talking about. No idea. And I'd known him, you know, my whole life. And I asked him a few weeks later, and he told me the story of how during the war, during World War II, 2 of his brothers and 1 sister were shot and killed in their home in Belarus, while his mother was in another room. And he just couldn't imagine, how could she have survived that? And how am I going to now survive the death of my daughter? No, it's really, you realize, one thing that I realized during my year was, you get to our age, and everyone has suffered something.
I know.
And we could all be crying all day long.
I know.
We could, but we
I feel
don't.
exactly like that.
We walk around and we do wake up with smiles again, and we do have energy again. And that is such a tribute to the human spirit.
Yes.
Yeah. It's something we should pat ourselves on the back for every day, that we have the ability to keep going.
I feel like I've reached the age where everything is bittersweet. I really do.
And we have to focus on the sweet and push the bitter aside.
Forget the bitter.
And forget the bitter. There's a wonderful poem that I quote at the end of the book. We live in passion, blaze in a cycle of wonder and apprehension. And to me, what that means is we live in cycles of sorrow and joy, but we have to let the joy prevail.
We do, and we have to focus on that. One of my favorite, one of my favorite lines of poetry is from the Sufi poets, dance when you're broken open. Because what else is there to do?
Right.
Oh, so tell me, one thing I'm very interested in is, you know, your family obviously had the same loss, but they didn't go through the process of writing a memoir. So I'm curious, how is it for you once you finish the memoir, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but you're having to retell the story for the last year or so. What effect does that have on you?
You mean after the book came out, going to talks, having this? It's been a really amazing and restorative experience.
Restorative.
And my parents and my other sister have been at a number of these book talks that I've given, and I can see for them also. It has so many, for one basic reason, because we're all talking about Anne Marie again, and she's still, and new people are coming up to me and saying, "Your sister Anne Marie, I feel like I know her, and I'll always remember her." How wonderful is that? So just on that level alone, it's so satisfying. But again, it's the having people come up to you and saying, "I know exactly. I lost my sister. I lost my brother. I lost my dog." I mean, I understand all of these losses bring up such feelings in you that when it's shared, when people come up to me and say, "You made me see my grief in a different way."
Right. One thing I do want to say is that from the very first page, literally the first page of this book, there is joy on the page. And one of the things that was really stunning about it to me was that it could be such a sad story and yet so beautiful right from the first page, and with frequent periods of relief. I found as a reader that every time I started to read a book review, it was almost like a parallel for that. When we shut off from our sadness, we give ourselves relief. So each time I started a book review, I felt relief. And so even in the saddest parts, it's not for that long.
Right.
And yet you gave full recognition to the tragedy of it. So I thought that was really exceptional.
Thank you.
How you did that. And that was just serendipity. That just...
It really, it was, because that again mirrored my year that, as you say, certain books, people say to me, were there any books that made you cry? Well, of course there were, but that wasn't a bad thing. Crying was a good thing for me.
You didn't get lost in it.
I didn't get lost in it. And what I did see many different ways through novels, particularly, of dealing with grief. And I was able to see there are healthier ways than others.
Can you give an example?
Well, I would say that a book that I just loved so much was Diana Adhill's, and this was a memoir, somewhere towards the end. And she wrote it when she was 89.
Yes.
And at age 89, she's already lost pretty much all of her close family has died. Most of her best friends have died. And yet she says, well, every day can bring a new friend, a new experience, a new sensation. Why should I be sad?
Right.
And it's a wonderful, and she was 89 when she wrote it. And I thought, if a woman, 89 years old, can experience such energy and enthusiasm about her life,
then it's possible.
Certainly I can.
Yes. And also she was very sustained by her memories, by her career that was stellar.
And
so
now she's in her, she's 94 probably now, and
we're
still going
tabs.
strong.
We're keeping tabs on her.
She's moved into, I know, assisted living, but she said, "Oh, it's great. I'm meeting all new people." What a wonderful attitude.
Yes, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
And I read that, the time that fears or dark thoughts accost us is when we're alone. And that they don't come if you get up and you get out. Even if you're in the supermarket talking to someone on the checkout, you're not going to have those feelings at that moment. So it almost doesn't matter what kind of connection, as long as it's connecting regularly, getting out.
And there's also such value, and I have a whole chapter in the book about kindness and how even when we're feeling our worst, when we're trying to do something kind for someone else, it really takes us out of our bad place because we're actually doing something for somebody else. And when doing that something is over, you don't go back to feeling bad. You actually think, "Oh, that was good.
Yeah. You feel better
good then."
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So let's backtrack a little. How long did it take you to write? Oh, well, no, let's go right back. You had interest from publishers and you couldn't see what the story might be. How did you come to the form?
Well, so then I decided that what I would do is I would move chronologically in a way, in that I would talk about all the different things I discovered in the order in which I discovered them. So recovering memories, letting go of the guilt, that was a big one. And once the guilt is gone and the memories are strongly held, then I could start exploring what is important in life. What really matters.
That was a distinct stage for you once the guilt was gone and the memories were strongly held.
Right. So then the book turns into, friendship and kindness and intimacy and connection with strangers. Because one of the wonderful things that came out of the year also was how many strangers became friends. Because not only would they write to me or come up to me on the street and say, "Oh, I liked your book," but they would say, "And I have this book you have to read. It was so good." And my mother had this. And we would really have a conversation. And my neighbors on my street, I've lived on the street for 8 years, and we've always been very nice to each other. "Hey, how you doing?" Halloween, we all trick or treat together. But we never really had a long conversation with any of my neighbors.
Everyone's busy.
During my year of reading, they knew what I was doing. And they would stop and say, "What'd you read today?" And we would have a conversation. Because when you talk about books, you can talk about anything.
Yes, and you're safe.
Yes,
so and everybody has their own opinion. You don't have to agree. It's yes, yeah.
So we'd have these wonderful long conversations, and we're still close because of those conversations we had about books.
I read on your website that there are 250,000 book clubs in the States. 250,000.
Yeah.
I did not realize it was that many.
And why are all those people getting together? Some of them, it's to have an excuse to get out at night. For some, it's to see their friends. For some, it's to discuss the book.
Yeah.
You know, everyone has a different reason, but the important thing is they're all coming together.
Yep, we just started a book group, and we have what I think of as very modern rules because everyone is so busy. So you don't have to have read the book. If you didn't like it, you don't have to have even gone past the first page, but you still come because it's social.
You still have to come to the group.
Well, you don't have to, you know, it's just we'd love to have you.
Right.
Because
it's a good idea.
Yeah, because otherwise sometimes life gets in the way or you just don't like it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Another good trick for book groups, for sort of stimulating conversation, because sometimes what happens in book groups is certain people always dominate the conversation, and I'm guilty of that. But
not me.
One way to encourage everyone to talk is, and a friend of mine, a woman in her 80s who I love, and has so much energy and just started writing poetry on her own and is getting it published. But anyway, she suggested that everybody has to bring to every book club meeting their favorite line from that book. We call it the Great Line. We've now call my book group the Great Lines Book Group, and it makes everybody have an opinion something that they liked. And what's so funny is so often we pick the same line.
Really?
And then you have people who will fight over the lines, but it really gets discussion going.
I think we'll try that. And if you don't like the book, just pick the first line and say, I didn't like it.
Well, and there have been some books that we hated as a group, and then we just picked out the most ridiculous line and said, that was so stupid.
But you all read it.
But we all did read it.
So you're very good.
We're pretty dedicated
students.
Group. We are. Yes. We're overachievers.
I'm like maybe a B. I'm a B student in the book group. But yeah, no, that's fascinating. And so do you have people still giving you suggestions for books?
I do. A lot. And I've discovered some great authors that way.
And is that what you're using when you blog on the Huffington Post? Your reviews?
Yeah. A lot of the reviews I do on the Huffington Post are books that have come to me really serendipitously. They're not being sent to me certainly not by publishers. They're not being sent to me, sometimes they're being sent to me by readers, but often it'll just be a book that I happen to pick up.
If somebody out there wants to send you a book, can they do that? And then what would happen?
I may review it, I may not.
No guarantees?
No guarantees, because now I'm working on a different book.
Yes.
And for my new book, there's a lot of reading that has to be done. So
a lot of research.
A lot of research. So much of my free time now is spent reading mysteries.
Okay. And would they send it, would they go on your website?
They can go on my website.
And find the information.
Find my email. People write to me all the time.
Okay. And so tell us about your new book, or as much as you're comfortable saying.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the new book is about letters and about why is it important? Why are letters still important in what I call really the post-postal age? Because that is what we are heading towards, the post-postal age. And the reason that this book came into being was because a long time ago, my husband and I lived in New York City, and we bought a broken down old house that needed complete renovation. I mean, you turn the water on and water came out of the walls because all the pipes had broken, it had no roof. And in the backyard of this old house, we found a trunk. I mean, this was like something out of a novel, a big steamer trunk full of letters. And they were all the letters that a boy had written to his mother from the time he was born until the time she died. So from about age 3, his first little, how do you like my writing, Mama, is one of the little cards, till she died. And he went to college in 1908. He went to Princeton for 4 years, and he wrote his mother 2 or 3 times a day. A day.
Our kids are both in college. We don't get quite the same.
Some of them are so short they're almost like a text because they're just on these little postcards. The mail came twice a day. But as a card, you have it forever. As a text, I don't have that forever.
No.
And when I hold these postcards that this boy wrote to his mother 100 years ago, I am having a physical connection with that person. And what's funny is when I first read those letters, I was a young mother. I had 3 kids so far.
You have 4 now.
Now I have 4. Right. And I really sort of fell in love with this guy because he's very funny, very charming. Then I reread the letters before my oldest went to college, and it was much more maternal, like, what a nice boy, writes to his mother, what a good boy. And so it really made me start thinking about letters and how much our generation and the generations before us have relied on letters to document so many important things.
And what are we losing if we lose letters?
Well, I think we're losing, most importantly, a chance of connection, a connection that is actually somewhat immortal, because as long as the letter exists, that connection exists. Yeah. So
doesn't get deleted.
And I'm not
from
a
the
Luddite.
inbox.
My husband always says, "You're such a Luddite. You hate
no,
technology."
No, I know you're not. You're tweeting and you're on Facebook.
Right. But I don't think we should be under the tyranny of technology. We should use technology. And one of our technological advances at one point in our life was to learn how to write.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a beautiful thing to see your son, and I've seen it once, one letter I got last year, to see my son's handwriting. It really was. It was special.
I actually keep a card from my son on my bedside table, and it's some superhero, and inside it says, "Hey, Mom, are you ready to read? I am."
Oh,
and he must have been about 7 or 8, and he obviously wanted to get my attention, so he stuck it and put it in writing because he knew I would read it and he'd get what he wanted.
That's great. Yeah, you want to keep that. I really want to keep that.
Would.
That's nice.
So do you think there's any hope, though, that it won't just die out?
Well, I think that what could happen is that people will realize that it's for very special occasions. I think that still today that letters of condolence are generally sent as a handwritten letter.
And thank you cards.
It's
supposed to be anyway.
Yeah, that's already dying out a bit. I'm getting more and more emails for that. But
phone calls.
If people can see it as something really special, I'll write you a letter on your birthday. I'll write you a letter when I fall. I'll tell my son, write a letter to you. Want that girl to fall in love with you, or whatever to fall in love. I have no whoever. Yeah. Write that person a letter. You want to get their attention? Write them a letter.
Yes.
How special is that?
Yes. I think about poetry and how marginalized that is in our society, but a lot of people do it even though it doesn't make money. They may never get published. So I wonder whether letters and possibly even some more ordinary books will get marginalized in that same way.
Well, you could say, people still write in their diaries and their journals.
Do they?
I do think. I mean, you certainly see them sold all over
for ages.
Well, I write down favorite lines and things like that, and that's often what I'll send in letters. Like I'll send my son Peter a really short letter saying, "Oh, I just read this great line. I just wanted to share it with you."
And I used to do that, but then I think that when I started blogging, and if you're writing a lot of nonfiction blogs, that sort of fills that gap. So you would be blogging and still doing those
I still do the lines, in a little book that I have. Yeah,
that's good. So do you get up every morning excited to work on your project?
Yeah, but it's a lot of reading. I've been reading a lot of letters.
Right.
And not only, I've read a lot of sort of famous writers' collections, James Joyce and Chekhov and then Nelson Mandela's letters, Martin Luther King, But I also have been trying to read sort of the unknowns letters, because that's another incredible thing about letters. You can be completely unknown, but your letter will survive you.
Yes. Well, I think that's the same with memoir. You can read a memoir. You can go into Barnes and Noble and find memoirs from people you do not know, because every human being's story is a story. It's a unique story, and it's just as powerful as someone who is a celebrity.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, that's exactly true.
And when will that be out?
Next year, from Simon & Schuster.
2013.
2013. Okay. Not sure when, either the summer or the fall.
Okay. All right.
I'm still finishing it. I'm still working on it.
Well, good luck with the rest of it.
Thank you.
We're out of time. I want to thank you for coming, and thank you very much, Nina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chin. Chin.